Thank you for inviting me to share my story at this very special service of remembrance. My husband Phil was a quiet, sensitive man. He had a great sense of humour and would subtly show his personality by wearing statement ties or brightly coloured pyjamas. Phil and I lived in the same area during our childhood and even went to the same primary school. We re-met as teenagers at a youth club, and we were married in 1968. It was a very happy 45 years of marriage, and we had 2 children, Alexander and Ben. Our family had already been through the full experience of coping with cancer before Phil became ill. Our older son Alexander was diagnosed with cancer and was treated at the Royal Marsden Hospital for 2 years before he died, aged 21, in 1996. Alexander faced his illness with such positivity. He guided us through that time and allowed us all to face his death together with courage and strength. Phil's diagnosis came as a real shock to us. He was admitted to East Surrey Hospital because he had started to feel unwell, and after some tests we were given the devastating news that he had late-stage cancer with no treatment paths available to him. The doctors told us that time was short and that we should prepare to say goodbye sooner rather than later. It was as stark as that. In fact, it was only 2 weeks between that diagnosis and end of life. After discovering the news, which Phil took with great dignity and courage, he wanted to return to our home which he so loved, and so we did. We were only home for 2 days before he was admitted to St. Catherine's in order to help make him more comfortable. When we arrived at the hospice, I could physically see the huge relief in Phil's body. At home he'd been greatly agitated, but as soon as we were settled at St. Catherine's, Phil became so calm. I remember someone pulling up a chair by Phil's bed for me, and as I sat in it, I felt totally calm and comfortable too. I started to relax, knowing the hospice would care for him and that he was in safe hands. The atmosphere at St. Catherine's, the gentleness and the kindness were so significant for all the family. Phil especially, of course, but for our son Ben and me as well. The hospice felt like a safety net wrapped warmly around us, and it was reassuring for us to know that Phil would be as comfortable as he could possibly be for as long as he had left. We felt totally at home during our time there. The hospice didn't feel clinical, quite the opposite. It was a lovely, gentle, quiet environment, something that was so appreciated by us all. We were treated as a whole family unit, and the medical staff always knew when it was time to move Phil on to the next stage. They answered our questions truthfully but sensitively, which was so important, and the nurses always took the time to ask Ben and me how we were feeling too. I valued that so much. They took the time to listen to us and made us feel we were the only ones that were important in that moment. Although Phil's diagnosis was so sudden and difficult to get our heads around, being at St. Catherine's wasn't all doom and gloom. We enjoyed having drinks from the drinks trolley together, visiting the gardens for a little respite, and we even had time to laugh, smile and talk of happier times. It was satisfying and it was profound. Even though it was very chilly, we took Phil out into the hospice gardens in a wheelchair, which he enjoyed, and we celebrated St. George's Day together the day before he died. This we later learnt was a St. Catherine's tradition, and I remember everyone was given a red rose. I stayed overnight at the hospice that evening too. I didn't want to sleep, but the nurses made me, and they were there to tell me to come now when it was needed. I trusted them completely. Alexander, in coping with his own illness, had always told us that he felt in his heart that one day everything would be okay, and that gave Phil the strength to face his own death with dignity, peace, and even a little humour. Phil died on the 24th of April 2013. When I saw him, he was dressed in those bright yellow pyjamas, and nurses had placed a red rose between his hands, the same rose he'd been given for St. George's Day. That is such a lovely and special memory for me, even 7 years on. During his short time at the hospice, Phil made an impression on everyone he met. He became known for those brightly coloured pyjamas and his courage, humour and cooperation. In fact, I was in a garden centre one day after Phil died, and a doctor came up to me and said, "Excuse me, but aren't you the wife of the gentleman in the brightly coloured pyjamas at St. Catherine's?" Of course I told her I was. And she told me that she'd been training at the hospice during Phil's stay and that he'd been a lovely patient. I'm so glad she took the time to come over to me. It made my day to hear that remark, and it really meant something that Phil had made such a nice impression on the staff. Now I support St. Catherine's by helping with a gift wrapping service in County Mayo Crawley every Christmas to help raise much needed funds. I have run some gift wrapping workshops for other volunteers, and it's lovely to do that in memory of Phil and to give something back for all the love and care the hospice showed to us. St. Catherine's is such a dedicated and worthy charity that benefits local people, and I'd ask people listening and watching here today to think carefully about what would happen if there wasn't a local hospice around. Imagine how different things would be. Hospices need every bit of money and support we can give them. And I know you'll agree that St. Catherine's Hospice holds a very special place in so many people's hearts, and that we can support it in whatever way we choose, both now and beyond. I understand why some people don't like thinking about hospices. I know a lot of people think hospices equal death, but they're so much more than that. They equal dedication, reassurance, happiness, support, gentleness, kindness, understanding and patience. Going to St. Catherine's is so much more than going in and watching someone you love die. The hospice supports you during the difficult times before death and afterwards too, through therapies and bereavement help. And although hospices are sad places, they can be happy places too. Even though we were only at St. Catherine's for a short time, it was profound, and our lasting experience was one of calmness, gentleness, kindness and love. I'll be forever grateful to the hospice for making the last week of Phil's life so calm and as lovely as it could be. I would just like to say how important it was to me that after Phil's death, I could still visit St. Catherine's whenever I felt the need to reflect and remember and enjoy the peace and calm that the gardens and the quiet room brought to me, where I could sit uninterrupted with my thoughts and memories of Phil and of course of Alexander too. That has always been a huge comfort, and when all of our lives can return to normal, I pray that it can and will continue. Thank you, St. Catherine's, for all that you do. You are simply wonderful. Thank you all.